In the beginning was the kingdom. One kingdom, one culture, one dream, one king, one truth, one way, one life, the kingdom. Then it happened. The mutiny began. The kingdom once united, now divided. There's still a king, veiled by darkness, who made a way to reunite the kingdom. And here we are, between two worlds, tourists in a foreign kingdom. The prince of this world exchanged the truth for a lie, that this is all there is. Wake up, O sleeper, and see the kingdom behind this world. For in the end, full restoration, there will be one kingdom again.
All right, hey guys. My name is Nat. I'm on ElevenTwelve staff here. You saw my husband, Jake Lambrisi, was up here leading worship for you guys. We have two children, Jack and Jovi, that are 6 and 8. I did that again. You know, when you're a little kid and you like to round your age up, the last 6 months of being that age, so they're not 7 and 9 yet. They're 6 and 8. Sorry if they kicked your shins or threw your water bottle this morning. We're trying to get them to stop doing that. But that's who I am a little bit. I have been working with high school students for since I was pretty much in high school. I love this age group so much. I love hanging out with you guys, getting to talk through life, and that this is the time when you get to take what Jesus did for us and really make your own choices with what you're going to do with it. And I love being a part of that. And so I'm excited that I get to share with you guys today about service. We're doing this Kingdom sermon series, and I get to share with you guys about service. So me being 30, I was hanging out with one of my friends this last week, and she's not necessarily a Christian or anything, and she was talking about just like, you know, maybe this is an insight into your future. You hit 30 and suddenly you start thinking like really adult things, like I should probably start like serving somewhere. Like I should give back. Like I don't know who she was giving back to or what she was talking about, but I was like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, I should find a place to I just really need to start doing that. And I think that's kind of the mentality with service. Maybe in high school you guys have community service hours. Everybody has those. You might forge a few signatures at the end of the semester to get by on those things. But that's pretty much like, okay, what community service looks like as a high school student. Not necessarily something that we enjoy doing. We do it to either pass a class, to get a scholarship, or maybe to be a part of a club, to add to our extracurriculars on our transcripts when we apply to college. And it's kind of how it looks as adults, too. That it's something that maybe I looked up the most generous people in history, and there's these men that started businesses, they did all this work, or some of them just inherited family money, and they decided one day they've spent all the money they could spend, and now it was time for them to give back. And so they made all these foundations, created all these legacies to try and give back what they'd done. Basically, if we have this cosmic scale of all the bad things that I've done, that we're trying to outweigh all the bad. Or even today, a lot of our big issues are environmental, and we're making such a big carbon footprint, and so maybe we're trying to undo this damage that we're doing to our earth, which truly is a gift that God gave us, and we are sometimes irresponsible with that. And even my shampoo bottle yesterday, or not shampoo, body wash, bought this body wash at Target, Peace, Love, and Beauty or something like that, and it talks about, as I'm reading the little bottle, we strive to make as little impact as possible on the environment so that when it's all said and done, it was like we were never here. Like the ultimate of their possible impact is to basically be invisible. And that's kind of what it is for any kind of foundation, any kind of community service, any kind of nonprofit organization, that you can try. And a lot of times in that kind of mentality, our biggest attractions are those big deal things. It's how many buildings can we build, how many libraries can we donate, how many villages can we bring clean water to, that it's all about the big deal. And ultimately, maybe the building lasts another 50, 70 years. Maybe your organization continues to do good work for another 100 years. But ultimately, our impact, all of this effort and work, it all just kind of comes down to self-glorification. How can I make myself appear a better person, appear humble, appear caring? just so that that can fade away in 100 years when I'm long gone and no one remembers my name. And so we're talking about this left-handed kingdom and this right-handed kingdom. And so to explain this a little bit better, we're going to start in Matthew 25. I said 26 last service, and that was incorrect. So if you guys want to flip open to Matthew 25, we're going to start in verse 31. And if you don't have your Bibles here, I just want to encourage you guys as you get used to being all together in this room, which is so awesome, that we love when you bring your Bible and a journal. And honestly, sometimes sermons are hard to sit through. And even just having that journal to write down things that you're hearing helps us to stay engaged. And we understand that. I understand that because I sit in those same pews sometimes. And those same things are very difficult. But someone reminded me of something. If you can't give the sermon yourself, then you still have notes that you can take on the sermon. And so we just try and be that as an entire group, that we're all going to be here learning, engaged. So bring your Bibles next time. If not, we always have some in the back that people tend to leave. If you left yours, go find it. But otherwise, we're going to be in Matthew 25. And so we live in this left-handed kingdom, this world where basically the pinnacle is self-glorification. It's me. How do I make my life feel important, worthwhile, like I made a difference, like I'm remembered? And Jesus kind of brings this contrast of a right-handed kingdom, of something that lasts beyond this life. And so to create that contrast, we have verse 31. When the Son of Man comes, who is Jesus, in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. It's just this picture that we are so consumed with our own glory, with what we enjoy, with what we want, with the goals that we have. And the thing that comes against that always is going to be the king of this universe who created us ourselves and his glory. And if he sits on this judgment throne of our lives, then there has to be more than right now. There has to be more than that invisible footprint that we're going to make on the world. Or there has to be more than these 70 years that you're given and how you positively or negatively affect the people around you. If there is this judgment seat where the Son of Man, Jesus, sits, and he's going to judge all of us along with his angels, just to I think we need to get this picture of glory in our heads, of something as glory. We pursue something as glory, whether it is, I love Harry Potter, so I picture it like Ron saying when he looks in the mirror of Arise, like, I see myself as head boy. Like, you see the thing that is the thing that you want most, what you think would make you most happy is kind of the thing that we chase after. That's our glory. It's that thing like, I got the college degree and I'm engaged and I'm going to have this amazing relationship, or I got on that sports team that I thought I was going to make it to, or I'm actually playing pro, whatever it might be. We got to switch that glory that we're chasing. That glory would instead be this picture of Jesus on his throne. And that's such a hard thing to picture. It's something that's beyond what our imaginations can grasp. But if we can begin to conjure up some kind of idea that would be more present in our minds than our own glory and what we want. So if we have this idea of Jesus sitting in all of his glory, surrounded by angels, if he has an entourage that would terrify us, that he is able and worthy to judge all of humanity, he gathers before him in verse 32 all the nations, and he will separate people from one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on his left. This is this left and right-hand kingdom thought. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." That if we can fix our eyes on his glory, ultimately, then we have so much to receive. That idea of our own glory and, that elusive, this is what's going to bring me ultimate joy and fulfillment, when it's ourselves, it's always going to be a mirage that as soon as you think you're there, it disappears. But this is something that's fixed. The coolest thing is that it's been fixed since the foundation of time for you. And that's what we get to pursue. And so continuing, he says in verse 34, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." Then the righteous ones will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you?" And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of my brothers, you did it to me.'" And I think that's the part that brings these two kingdoms together. That though this kingdom of heaven, the kingdom where God's glory is ultimate, is otherworldly. It exists outside of this kingdom. What he judges them on is how they lived out their life on this earth, in this left-handed kingdom. That for all of the people that they serve, they thought they were just serving a less fortunate person, someone that is easily overlooked, that they were doing physical acts to meet someone else's needs. But when they did it for him, for his kingdom, then that's how he receives them. And so to get to step out of that service that is community service-based, it's human effort-based, I think we have to understand kind of what that is. We talked about, like, they're obsessed with the big deal things, the things that are going to get the most press, the most affirmation and notoriety, solving big world issues. Like, I mean, everyone wants to cure cancer, so my whole life is going to be in pursuit of curing cancer or of, like, solving world economic issues. Those are all good things, but they also require external rewards. The affirmation of others, publicity, thanks, and results. Someone who spends their entire life trying to solve one economic issue of one small third world country village just to find the village worse off than when they started, what do we say about that person's life? You're like, sorry, buddy, good try. Like, the amount of disappointment in that happens. We are so driven by the results because that's where we find our worth in what we do. That left-handed kingdom service, it also gets to pick and choose who it serves based off of guilt, based off of our own understanding of how something might benefit us. Whether it's at your job or at school, you're going to choose the powerful people that might help you along in your career or popularity, or whether it's that you choose to serve the least fortunate, the humble-looking ones because it makes you look humble, like, oh, I'm such a good person. Do you see me doing this right now? That we pick and choose, but that servant attitude does not remain consistent. And you all have seen that, where you see the person, you're like, okay, you're being helpful right now because the teacher's in the room, but you just wait till the teacher leaves and they're going to be the ones making a mess. And it's that inconsistency that we almost, like, as a world, we kind of are repulsed by it, right? Like, we don't enjoy people that are like that. We're drawn toward people that are sincere, consistent, and you can't do that apart from Jesus. So right-handed kingdom is this true service. I think a great explanation of that is found if you just flip over a couple pages to Matthew 5. It's going to be Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And it's probably a lot of verses that you have heard before, even outside of church. If you've never been in a church where they talks about you're the salt and light of the world, and that you should love your neighbors and love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. And all of this is coming down to, I think, one central theme in Jesus' sermons, that he talks about all these different ways that it plays out in life. But if we start in Matthew 5, he starts his Sermon on the Mount, and he says, "Seeing the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and when he sat down with them, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.'" Kind of an opposite of this kingdom, right? Poverty is never a positive, but they are the ones that are considered valuable in his kingdom. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Meekness is kind of also another negative word. It sounds like a mouse to me, like, it's small, like, forgettable. But if Jesus is our ultimate example of this servant life, of true service, he's also this ultimate example of what meekness is. It's all power and authority given to him and then submitted to serve others. That it's power with restraint. And so the meek are the ones that go and serve, not the ones that wait for when there's, like, an opportunity worthy of their time. But don't we tend to do that sometimes? We're like, well, there's probably somebody else that will do that. I'll just wait. I'll just write it out until I'm getting, like, a lot of attention, then I'll go and do that thing. But instead, that meekness, it gives us the freedom to just see a need and go and do it, regardless of who's watching or who's not watching, that it can just see the important task. Sometimes our thoughts are so clouded with how we're perceived by others, by what they might think if we did it. Maybe they would judge us for serving, or maybe they would think we're trying to get attention by serving, or all of these jumble of thoughts, and we get to have this clarity. It comes from knowing that we are citizens of this right-handed kingdom, that we serve ultimately God's glory, and that we have a Father who sees us. And as he continues through this entire Sermon on the Mount, it goes through chapter 5 to, I just want you guys to see this verse in chapter 6. Starting in the beginning, he says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you." If we lived for just God's glory, we give the freedom to not be stressed about receiving glory and praise or taking on too many jobs or taking on the wrong jobs, and we can just sit in the freedom of doing what needs to be done, that he would see it and be praised by it, and he would praise you for it, that we get to live for his glory and his affection, that we get to delight in the actual service that we do, that can be a gift of love to God. I remember, you hear these songs, and worship is something that we love to give to God. It's fun for us. It elicits an emotional response most of the time, and Jake does a really good job of affirming to us that we're not just following our feelings when we worship, but that it's deserved to God, that he is worthy of it, whether or not we feel like it at the time. But that worship needs to extend through the rest of our lives. Romans 12 calls us to be living sacrifices, that the way that we live our lives is literally our act of service and worship to him, that it would continue. And that I think that idea sometimes I would go, how do you love God back? I can't give him a hug. I can't, he has nothing that he needs he has nothing that he doesn't have already that I could give him. What kind of gift could you give to someone who had everything, that they would feel loved by it? But if it's the one thing that he doesn't have, it's our whole hearts, it's our whole attention and affection, that in those moments when life could just be about ourselves, we choose to make it about him. And we get to serve him. And I think in those secret moments where we serve and no one sees what you're doing, that we would learn to delight in those instead. Such a hard thing to do, to notice that the whole family's gone. You could just leave your entire house a wreck, but you could wash the dishes for your mom. You could clean up the kitchen for her, and she probably wouldn't even thank you for it. But you weren't doing it for her gratitude anyways. It was just to love God, that you sit there in a house entirely alone doing the dishes, loving God through what you do. That looks so different than what we think loving people is. We either think of it as romantic or affectionate, but to a God who cares about the way that we treat others, who cares about those things, that is love. That's how we get to profess that to him. And so I think in this true service, it gets to come also motivated out of love. It's not motivated out of our own efforts anymore, which is exhausting, which comes and goes with feeling conviction or guilt, versus actually just continuing to serve consistently. And it's not about the effectiveness of what we do either. That sometimes you're like, I don't even want to wash dishes, right? They're just going to get dirty again anyways. That's your excuse to your mom. You're like, but we're going to dirty some more at dinner. I don't want to wash dishes. But that's not about the effectiveness of what we do anymore. When it's given into God's hands and he gets to be the one to multiply our work, the one to decide how effective the work is, but ultimately it's just about serving and loving our God. And then the freedom that we have in true service is that we are free to serve all. So I just want you guys to flip over with me. Got your Bibles? John 13. Story about Jesus as he's coming to the end of his life. He's coming to the end of his time with his disciples. He spent 3 years with them, 24/7. And he's established himself as this authority in their lives, that he's proven it by the power that he has, by doing miracles, that they've seen that this guy is powerful. He's doing something, and they follow him, and they've chosen to make themselves disciples, to literally follow where he goes, do what he does, learn from him. And I think sometimes when we think of this servanthood life or this servant life, we think of it as like, well, everybody's equal and there's no power involved in it. It's all just like a bunch of meek servants. But we forget that Jesus was literally God with flesh on, that he was the most powerful one, and that he had all of that authority, even in human terms, that he had disciples, he had followers. But this is how he chose to leverage his leadership. So in John 13, they all come together for this Passover feast. And I think a lot of you have probably heard this story, but they sit down, and normally the tradition would be that there was a servant, the lowest servant in a household, that would come and wash the guests' feet. Because they wore sandals, they walked in dust and dirt and poop and everything. And so no one wanted to do it, but that was reserved for a student, a servant. It almost signified that you were the lowest of the low in that house. And they don't even talk about it. They just appear, right? Sitting at a table, surrounding the table, all of them dirty feet and sandals on, no one saying a word. Like that silent standoff that you do to like see who's going to go first. Because they all know that when one of them chooses to do it, that they're the one saying like, I guess I'm the lowest of the low. Like they were waiting to be assigned, probably waiting for Jesus to say like, oh, Peter, it's actually you. You're the worst one here. You go clean our feet. Have you ever done that? I think about like when I was a kid growing up, we had dogs and no one wanted to clean up the dog poop. We had like acres, so you would like have to hike to clean up all of the dog poop. And me and my brother would just wait, like you'd wait weeks until it piled up and until our parents said something. And then it was just going to be like, well, who's the one volunteered as tribute? Like which one do our parents hate more that they send out to do it? And even in that, sometimes like they would ask us like, oh, people are coming over, go clean up the poop. And so you go outside like no shoes on, no plan to like actually hike. You're just gonna like walk and pick up the most nearly visible poop. You like do a bad job cleaning and you leave. It's a mess back there, but no one's gonna look back there. And I think about that kind of like half-hearted serving, like, oh, if you make me, like I'll go do it, but I won't do a good job at it. And this is what Jesus does. Jesus in verse 3, knowing that the Father had given him all things into his hands, understanding the entirety of his power and authority and what God had done and was doing, that his power was coming from God and he was going back to God, rose from the supper, laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. In one commentary that I read, it was kind of that idea. It wasn't just a half-hearted service that Jesus did, like, oh, no one's doing it, I'll just grab a bucket and like dunk your feet in it, so at least we're not all sitting around have like dirty feet at a dinner. No, he like fully took off all of the things about himself that gave him power and prestige and title, and instead he fully dressed himself like a servant, fully prepared to do a good job, doing the worst job in that house that no one wanted to do. He poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Then he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, what I am doing now you do not understand, but afterward you will understand. And Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Just as a sidebar, that there is a element of serving in allowing other people to serve you. That Peter didn't have this understanding, or Simon, that he thought, no, like you're better than me, you can't serve me. Basically put God in a position where he was telling God what to do. You can't serve me. And if you're that person that anytime that there's an opportunity, people are clearing plates and someone goes to grab your plate and you're like, no, I got it. Like, you can't take my plate. Actually, I'll take your plate. I'll take everyone's plate and I'll take them all and I'll go do it. Then we have this kind of pride and ego and a little bit of identity built into being the one that always serves. And that sometimes it's a gift to allow someone else to serve you. And sometimes we have to practice being in both of those positions. But sometimes you can serve someone else by receiving the blessing of them serving. So Peter is confused. He says, you can never wash my feet. And Jesus said to him, if I do not wash you, you will have no share with me. Basically, you reject me in this. Like, you don't want to receive this gift from me, then we have no relationship together. And then Peter says, okay, Lord, then don't wash just my feet, wash my hands and my head also. Like, he just does not get it. And now he's like, oh, is that what you mean? No, I really want to be near you. Like, wash all of me. And I love just that Jesus says this to him, the one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean. Sounds confusing, but basically it's not about the ritual, and that's what he wanted Peter to understand. It wasn't that this specific water was so cleansing and like, it was nothing about that. It was this heart of allowing someone else to serve you and to recognize the heart of Jesus, that he was setting this example for them, that the leader should be the one that ultimately serves. And so if you skip down, he'd washed all their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place. And this is verse 12. Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I, then, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done for you. Truly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. And that's the invitation to you guys, that there's still power and authority and position involved in these things, but that the most powerful position that we can ever take is that one that follows Jesus in meekness, to be the one that serves. And just before this, in Luke, he talks about how as they're coming to this dinner, there's two brothers that are disciples, and they're fighting about who's going to sit next to Jesus in heaven. And Jesus could have just shut them down and said, like, no, wait, you have no idea, but you guys are actually the lowest of all of the disciples. He could have said with his words, basically, that was not their position, but instead he said it with his actions in this passage, that our position should be the ones to serve, that it's this servant lifestyle, not just choosing to turn on and turn off service, that we say, like, I'm going to be a servant today. I feel guilty or convicted, or I have extra energy today. Sometimes our excuse for not serving is I'm low energy today. I feel lazy. Like the lamest excuses, but I do them myself too. But instead, this idea that Jesus never stopped being a servant, that he never stopped being God either. That when we choose to serve, when we say, like, oh, it's weekend of service, or it's my life group's community service project, or I have to do a community service for my hours at school, when we choose to turn it on and off, we're still the ones in charge. That it's still about our glory, our time, our schedule. But when we choose to hand that all over to God, to be the ones that are servants, we give up that right to be the ones in charge. That every morning you wake up and you are a servant in your household, to your siblings who can't thank you because they don't have words to say, or to your mom who doesn't seem grateful for it, that when you get to your job, you don't choose to be a servant, you are a servant. And you serve them because of Christ, not because of who they are. That you walk into those places, and then we get to see the important tasks that need to get done, and we do them for the sake of getting the tasks done, for the sake of serving our King, not for the sake of who's going to see me, how's this going to affect me, how is this possibly going to benefit me, or how is this going to hurt me if I do this. And we get to serve simply and faithfully because there is a need. I think a lot of times those feelings come and go, that guilt comes and goes, or even the conviction like to serve will come and go. But if there's something, if we pursue maybe the most desirable character trait that God ever had was, or that Jesus ever had, was humility. But it's kind of that one trait that you can't pursue directly. You try and pursue, like, I want to be more humble. The second you turn around and go, look how humble I am. I'm more humble. Like, you just stopped being humble. And service is that one way that we do truly pursue humility. That waking up every day, choosing to serve the least of these, to make every day about others and God's glory, not about our own glory, then we truly get to walk in humility. And then it disciplines the feelings rather than allowing our feelings to control the service. And I think of the example even in my family. When I'm frustrated with someone, service has this incredible sanctifying power. Sanctifying just means making holy. And so if I am sitting there and I'm frustrated with Jake about something and I have anger or resentment towards him, like, I've made it my habit now that my first go-to is that I go to the kitchen and I start washing dishes. Or if, there's not dishes to do, like, find another chore in our house, clean the bathroom. Because in that act of service, physically getting up off of my butt, doing something to serve others, directly thinking about him, then I start to pray for him while I'm doing those chores, and then my heart starts to shift. And it's not about me anymore now. It's about I've just loved God through my actions, and God gets to work through that to change my heart, to put me back into a loving position towards him. And so when we step into that, we give God that space to move in our lives. That through that service, we get to take up our cross daily and continually just be a servant, to follow Christ's example, and that it doesn't have to depend on how people are going to look at us or what they're going to do, and it doesn't have to depend on the results that come out of it. I think a lot of the worldly left-handed service a lot of times is kind of like a bull in a china shop, right? We go to a third world country and we like, that's broken, I need to fix that, and then I'm going to give you water, and then I'm going to give you money, and then I'm out of here because I got to go back to my thing back in the US, or things like that. And it doesn't necessarily have the sensitivity to wait. It's urgent because I feel motivated right now, so I better run and go and do, and then before this energy runs out, and then I'm going to get out of here because I have my life to get back to, because now this energy has dipped. But if we have this consistent energy, then I think we also get to have that meekness, that humility to serve sensitively. Service isn't just I'm going to go home and I'm going to clean my parents' entire house. Who cares if I did it the way that they wanted me to or that they appreciate it. But service instead can look like loving a friend. It can look like listening well. When you guys come here on the weekends and you meet a new friend, to really get to know them, to ask them about their story, that you get to bear their burdens, that it also talks about praying for people, and that in that we get to carry what they're going through and be a part of that and partner with them as we walk away from them, when we're separate from them. That service can also just be common courtesy, that when we walk away or walk around through our life, you go to Target, you're driving to school, that we're not just in this zone where it's all about me and what I want in this moment and what I'm thinking about, but instead a servant's mentality is therefore that I'm here to make others' lives better. That we would look to the needs of others and the interests of others first. It means, like I said, receiving someone else's service. It means guarding the reputation of others, that we are careful about the way that our friends speak about others and the conversations that we engage in. That it means that when opportunities arise, whether there's a need at your school or a need even here at church, that we're prepared to step into it, that we don't have to weigh this kind of cost-benefit analysis, like, this is going to suck, but how will it benefit me long-term? No, instead, we just get to go, oh yeah, that's me. I'm a servant. I'm a servant of Christ, so that means this is what I do. And that if you guys can have that mentality, it frees us to have so much joy. That serving is one of my favorite things. I might be the last one to want to sign up for a community service project or weekend of service. Honestly, completely honest, I hate those things. At the end of the day, I am exhausted, and you feel like, cool, did that make any impact at all? That's in my completely worldly mindset when I completely take out of the equation the part where Jesus is watching me. But on mission trips or hanging out with you guys, digging a ditch can be the funnest thing that we've ever done, right? The most jokes come out of that. It was so much fun. But we don't call up our friends. We're like, hey, are you doing anything on Saturday? I saw this field that's full of weeds. What if we go pick them all? That's really not our mentality. But I promise you that with Jesus, that there's so much joy on the other side of service. That a life about ourselves, consumed with our own glory, ends in tragedy. But a life obsessed with serving others and God's glory has ultimate meaning and can have a fulfilling purpose, that we have the ability to invite others into that glory. And so my challenge to you this week would just be that you would have the mentality of a servant, that you would get that as disciples, as followers of Christ, we don't even get the option to say, today I'm a servant, today I'm not a servant, that it would just be, oh yeah, I'm a servant. I follow Jesus, I follow his example, and that any opportunity that comes my way, God, may it be about your reputation and your glory, not for mine in any way. And so let me just pray for you guys and we can get out of here. God, I thank you so much that you receive our service as a gift, that we have something that we can give back to you, God. Would you make this week about you? Would you help us each day to understand more how we are servants of you ultimately, and that you would be the source of all of our energy and the one to open our eyes to needs, to make a difference in the lives around us and in our communities. We love you so much, God. It's in your name. Amen.